Of the people who are still alive but have drifted out of your life, who do you wonder about the most and why? Kid I knew when I was 15. We weren't close friends, but he called me up in the middle of the night once to tell me he was going to kill himself. He hung up on me and wouldn't answer his phone after that. I woke up my mom and convinced her to drive me to his house at like 3 a.m. He came out and was fine. He was just completely shocked I actually came to check on him. He was really thankful that I cared at all. His home life was pretty crummy and he moved away to stay with his grandma soon after that. After he moved out of state we lost touch. That was 20 plus years ago and I still wonder if his life got better. I hope he did. My buddy from 1993-2003. He was a part of my daily, weekly life for an entire decade. I was the best man at his wedding. He married a lovely woman and she and I were even friends. They moved away to a new town and started a family. We last went to a ball game together in 2011. I never heard from him again after that. In that 10 years I was sure we would be friends for life. I did not expect that we would drift apart, but it happened. This has happened to me twice. Once was with a guy in my wedding. Good friends, but he moved far away. He came back for the wedding but never really saw him since. It was kinda a lesson in life that people don't just kinda stick in your life, they are either there or not. Another friend, best friend from high school, was in his wedding around 10 years after high school. Driving back I realized I was probably never going to talk to him again and haven't. I just knew. I'm very grateful for our friendship and some things are just meant for a certain time. When I was 7 years old, I had a best friend named Shannon. One day she didn't come to school, and nobody answered at her house when my mom called. A month later I got a phone call from her and she said they had to go away and she missed me. Then the call cut out like someone took the phone and hung up on her. I never heard from her again. I assume she and her family went into witness protection or something similar. I hope they made it through and she grew up okay. This gave me chills. My name is Shannon and one day I moved abruptly due to child support issues. I was living with my bio father who was a horrible parent to my sister and I. Sadly he won custody over my mom who was stable and worked several jobs to provide us. I never got to say goodbye to my friends and get my stuff at my old school. When I was a child and living with my parents, we rented our basement to a man named Toon. He was super nice to us and even tutored my brother and I in school. The coolest thing was that he was super into astronomy and every so often, he set up his telescope in our backyard to look at stars and the moon and invited us to look as well. He became like family to us and when my parents decided to tear down our house and build a new place, Hoon came along with us to live in a temporary space until the house was built, and then moved back to our new house as our tenant again. During this period, Hoon also drove my brother and I to school as we were not living within walking distance from our temporary space. After 2 years, one day my parents said that Hoon moved back to Malaysia and we never saw him again. My then friend, who was another one of our tenants, told me that Hoon died and my parents were lying to me. I asked my parents about this but they said that isn't true. I think my then friend was just messing with me. I always wondered why he suddenly moved and haven't been able to find any online presence of him. Edit. Wow, thanks for the award. My first one. I wasn't expecting that many responses either. I feel it is now my mission to get to the bottom of this. Stay tuned, smile. A good friend of mine that I've known since 4th grade, his mother died from Huntington's and he tested positive for the gene for it, which means, as far as I am aware, he is guaranteed to get it. I know he's done well for himself over the years but he still creeps into my mind from time to time wondering how he is. His nickname was Question. Kid from high school. He used to come sit with us at lunch. Great guy, super nice. Every single thing he said was, "Hey, question." He would ask you about your entire day, where you got your new shoes, ask about your haircut. I would ask him the same questions and he wouldn't answer me. Kind of stare off and almost ignore the question completely. Then he would ask you another question. Sounds like some kind of autism to me. Yeah, He probably heard that it's important to ask questions in a good conversation and ran with it. RuneScape user LoneWolf1039, you made my childhood amazing, bro. Countless hours playing one of my childhood favorites with an online friend. We called each other brother. If you're still out there, MK Grouden misses you. Man, there's probably a ton of us in this thread remembering our old friends who logged out forever. Here's to you, archaeologist aka Stanley, old friend from 3rd grade who moved to Pennsylvania and not too long after that stopped logging into RuneScape. He was my closest friend at that time. When I went backpacking around, say, Asia, I went with no particular plans. I ran into a Polish paratrooper my second day there who used me to get a couple of girls to go out for drinks with him. Since I said hey to him earlier in the day, he wasn't going anywhere in particular either, so we spent the next 2 months on the road going to 5 different countries. The guy was literally my brother for those 2 months. We parted ways when I had to go to a country he couldn't get a visa for, and it was where I was to catch my flight home. We still talked daily for a few weeks and we were talking about starting a business. Then he falls off the face of the earth. I'm positive his dad was someone, so he didn't talk much about certain aspects of his life. He didn't have any social media and he didn't renew the domain he hosted his email on, saw no way of contacting him. Even friends who we met along the way frequently ask if I've heard from him since they wanted to connect with him again. I keep hoping one of these days we'll run into each other at a cafe or something by the waterfront having a beer like we did traveling. I made a lot of questionable choices in my later teen years and early 20s. Before I was capable of using solid judgment, I wonder about the people I unintentionally hurt, and I wonder if I should apologize a decade later. I wonder what they would feel or think if I crossed their minds. I wonder if they've forgiven me and considered giving me the benefit of the doubt, or if they'll always remember me as the one who did X to them or didn't do Y. I feel a lot of regret and it still brings me a lot of shame, and I let it hold me back a lot. I got sober almost 3 years ago, and during that time I've reached out to make amends to people. Most people just laugh it off like, wow, I didn't even remember that moment that's haunted you for years. It's uncomfortable but surprisingly gratifying at the same time. Some were harder than others as I listened to the hurt some have carried over the years because of my actions. It still gives me comfort in knowing that my side is clean now and I don't repeat those behaviors. Forgiveness made a lot more sense to me as I did this. My best friend from elementary school, he was so genuine and full of joy. I hope growing up didn't take that part away from him. That's a really nice hope for someone else. Nice to hear that. You should pursue finding him. Chances are, he feels the same. Me too. I moved around a lot and it was hard for me to make any friends. She was the very first real friend that I had. It only lasted about a year or two before I switched schools again. I was really upset about losing my best friend and even tried to keep in contact with her, but she didn't have a phone back then and it wasn't really reciprocated, so I guess I stopped trying. I worked with a girl back in my early 20s when I was still in the service industry. We would hang out pretty regularly. I had a bit of a crush on her. I really thought there may have been something there. Anyways, she stopped showing up to work. Everyone just assumed that she had quit. She was a bit of a wild child, moved around a lot and had a bunch of different serving jobs, so nobody really thought twice about it. People just stopped showing up all the time in that line of work. A few weeks later we found out that her family, police, had been searching for her. Apparently she disappeared. Still think about it a lot actually. I'm guessing she's dead, but you never know. I grew up going to church with a girl that I didn't get to know until I was an adult. We were the same age and ran in different circles at school, but were cordial on Sundays. When I was 20 or so I ran into her on a break from a night class at our community college. We had a chat, found out we had a lot in common, and made it a habit of finding each other on that break throughout the semester. I didn't see her after that semester. Facebook was in its infancy, so I didn't think to reach out online, so I went about my life. Her sister recently reached out online. I can't recall the last we spoke, but it was great to catch up. I told her about my experience and how much I had learned to like her sister. Unfortunately, she told me that he had been murdered shortly after that semester. I think I prefer not knowing. I often wonder what happened to the girl that hit me with her car that icy night and took my leg. It's been over 25 years now and I don't hold any animosity towards her. Never did. It was just an accident. I hope she went on to have a good life. Mine has had its ups and downs, but I'm in the best place I've ever been now. I'd just like to have the chance to reassure her that I'm doing fine. I wonder if she still has your leg. I wanted to make it into a lamp. It could have been a major award. I can see why you're doing okay. That's a great sense of humor you got there. Smile. Nobody came to mind at all at first, but then one person I remember does pop up every now and again. She was a friend in like 3rd grade, and we used to do normal kid stuff, but we had great chemistry and were the best at making our own fun, inventing games with what was around us. Always sunny. I haven't seen her in 25 years. I wonder what kind of person she turned into. Little weird things remind me of her when I see something. We would make a game out of her. The weather is like the summer we played outside the most, completely absent from social media and Google results, but also had a challenging name to spell from memory. Edit. Wow, so many people have similar stories. I certainly have some bittersweet feelings hearing all these tales of happy childhoods disconnected by time. Remember, all your lost friends out there probably tell the same stories about you and smile, picturing throwing balled-up socks at ceiling fans or dancing like maniacs or whatever all crazy kids did. In 3rd grade, there was this black kid, only one in our grade, who was absolutely hilarious. He was a complete spaz and the whole class ate it up. Then one day he gave out invitations to his birthday party at some arcade, mini-golf, and go-kart place. Every kid's dream. The popular girl in the class laughed and said, "Why would I go to this?" and threw out the invite. Several classmates followed. The day of the party comes, and it turns out it was literally his family and me that showed up. He didn't seem to care, but you could see the hurt in his parents' eyes. Honestly, that party was an absolute blast because it meant more tokens for each of us. After that school year ended, his family moved to DC and I never saw him again. I still think about him sometimes to this day. Kids can be so cruel. I once took my son to a classmate's birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese and he was the only kid who came. He, the birthday girl, and her little sister had a great time. More tokens for each of them, like you said, but I felt really badly for the girl and her parents. Those party packages aren't cheap. A friend of mine was going on a canoeing trip once and never got back. A few months later he was declared dead because he couldn't even be found by Interpol. 2 years go by and he appears on a picture on Facebook as German teacher in school in Kazakhstan. Apparently only his sister was in on the fact that he just wanted to start a new life. Hope he's doing well and wish to see him again someday. I had a friend like that when we were in high school. He was an extremely talented artist, singer, comedian, and actor who could have built a successful career out of his talent, but he turned his back on that and decided to just slack off and smoke pot for a few years. Then one day he disappeared. Ended up some years later in a Central Asian country. He disappeared again. Then a few years later he resurfaced back in the US. Every few years he would pop back into the lives of our old circle of friends, and vanish. Then last summer he died of COVID, still relatively young. I was about 12 when there was this girl in my class who would talk to me when I was bullied badly at that point in my life. At first I thought it was a trick to bully me, but she was genuine and actually talked to me like I was human. Of course I instantly crushed on her, but aside hormones, she really was a kind-hearted person who was pretty intelligent. She always seems to be resourceful by adapting to any situations and just had this optimism that I haven't seen before. On the last day of school I was trying so hard to ask her for her number because I really felt like she was a friend and just a wonderful person in general. But I was too nervous and we both stared at our shoes for a little while before bidding farewell. Man, I really wonder how you've been, Stephanie. I really do hope you have an amazing life because you deserve it more than anyone I know. My best friend was married for a while and I fell hard for her brother-in-law. I would joke about it with her sometimes, but I didn't take it seriously. He was younger than me and kind of weird and I had no reason to think he was attracted to other guys. But then there were a few times he hung out with us, and had a bit to drink, and ended up telling me he liked me but was terrified about grown-up things. He was in school and still living at home, especially relationships. I was crazy about him so I tried for a while to, get him moving, get him out in the world more, get him to try new things, start to live, I guess. But it was very challenging and I didn't get that far. Eventually I let it go. My best friend and her husband moved away and have since gotten divorced. I'm still in touch with her but it's unlikely I will ever see her ex-brother-in-law again. I've never told anyone but I still think about him all the time. He was definitely someone I felt connected to in a special and genuine way. It just wasn't the right situation. 2 guys I knew in college who were borderline alcoholics and didn't graduate. I didn't know them well but they were among my larger circle of friends. One dated my friend for a while and when they broke up he called her and told her he was going to kill himself and wouldn't say where he was. We thought at the time that it was a genuine suicide attempt. He revealed a year later that it was a revenge thing towards her. Still, it was clear he had mental problems and needed help for them. He was put on antidepressants and would stop them in order to get wasted on weekends. He dropped out soon after. The other guy was always quiet. He was a movie nerd and it was adorable to hear him go on about movies, but in a much less dramatic fashion as the first guy I mentioned. He partied too hard and failed out by sophomore year. I do wonder about them from time to time. A close friend from high school. We kept in touch for a few months after graduation, but then she stopped responding to texts. Ran into her at a house party about a year after. She told me she'd lost her phone with all her contacts, and to get her new number from a mutual friend of ours because she didn't have her phone on her at the party. We hugged, said goodbye, can't wait to talk again. It was great to catch up. I contacted the mutual friend the next day, who got back to me a couple of hours later saying my friend told them to tell me to never try to contact her again. It's been 6 years since and sometimes I still lie awake wondering what the hell happened to make her 180 like that, or if it had been a long time coming, and if it had, what I did to upset her so much, or why she never said something sooner, or why she was all smiles and laughter the last time I saw her. Has to be the numerous people I deployed with. You get to be so close over there, then you get back and you may or may not be in the same unit still, but chances are pretty high you have nothing in actual common except the military. You relegate your relationship to head nods in passing, then one of you goes on to another unit or gets out of the military and that is the end of it. You never see or talk to each other again. It's pretty crazy when I think back about it. I was in route clearance and spent 10 hours a day with a guy talking constantly about anything and everything and being through some shit together, but I have literally no clue what he is doing today. I didn't know what he was up to a month after getting back. Happy ending. My best friend ages 11-17 got into a charismatic evangelical cult, renounced everyone as sinners, never saw her again. I heard she got married in out mid-20s and it broke my heart. We reconnected as 33-year-olds. She escaped the cult, divorced the dude, reconnected with her family, and reached out to me. Having her back has been a gift. Plus we are both child-free wine lovers, so we are getting to know and rebuilding our love for each other. A friend of mine was going on a canoeing trip once and never got back. A few months later he was declared dead because he couldn't even be found by Interpol. 2 years go by and he appears on a picture on Facebook as German teacher and in school in Kazakhstan. Apparently only his sister was in on the fact that he just wanted to start a new life. Hope he's doing well and wish to see him again someday. I had a friend like that when we were in high school. He was an extremely talented artist, singer, comedian, an actor who could have built a successful career out of his talent, but he turned his back on that and decided to just slack off and smoke pot for a few years. Then one day he disappeared. Ended up some years later in a Central Asian country. He disappeared again. Then a few years later he resurfaced back in the US. Every few years he would pop back into the lives of our old circle of friends and vanish. Then last summer he died of COVID, still relatively young.